Hello and welcome to this Advective weather video. Today we're going to be talking about the substantial winter storm that's going to unfold across much of the United States over the next several days, and the subsequent Arctic air outbreak that will sweep south across the United States, potentially breaking century-old records. After that, we'll go into the severe weather that is attendant with this system. That's going to be happening across the deep south tonight, and then pushing east across the Gulf Coast into the southeast Atlantic area tomorrow afternoon. But first, major winter storm on the way. It's already started to get going across the Central Plains, and through the next 48 hours, this is going to sweep into the Great Lakes region through the Midwest. Already blizzard conditions expected, blizzard warnings are out, and there could be a foot of snow or more in several places, particularly around the Great Lake coasts. As you can see from that map, blizzard conditions possible in quite a few areas. Anywhere in that orangey yellow color or the reds, greater than 50% chance of blizzard conditions. And that's tomorrow into Friday night. Blizzard warnings are in effect presently for much of Iowa, and that's for this afternoon and tonight, before we get into Friday proper. Besides all this, flooding, possible farther east and farther south from heavy rain, especially where the ground is already saturated from previous flooding events, and those severe weather down in the south that I mentioned. After this system moves through, it's going to pull down a bitterly cold Arctic air outbreak across much of the United States. You see here the National Weather Service calling it a mid-January Arctic blast. They don't use that terminology lightly. Dangerously cold wind chills are expected. It could be well below 30 degrees Fahrenheit in some parts of the northern plains and northern Rockies, such as Montana, potentially get as low as minus 40 Fahrenheit. And once you tag on the strong winds as well, wind chills potentially as low as minus 60 Fahrenheit for some parts of northwest Montana, which is absolutely incredible for the United States, at least the continental United States. Alaska gets this slightly more often. But regardless, life-threatening to anyone who's outside without the proper equipment and the proper clothing. Any exposed skin could suffer frostbite in just a few minutes in these conditions, and so you don't want to be going outside unless you have to. If you do go outside, you want to have as much skin covered as physically possible and spend as little time outside as possible during this cold air outbreak for your safety. And obviously, if you've got others with you that you're responsible for their safety as well. And if you are having to take people with you, like if you have a child that's ill that needs to go to hospital, for example, make sure they're fully covered up as well. Now, there will also be further winter weather in the west. There's an atmospheric river that's going to be ploughing into the Pacific Northwest, bringing heavy snow throughout the mountains of California, Oregon, and southern Washington, and potentially even to lower levels for a time. And besides all that, there could be some freezing rain in west central Oregon as well. So do pay attention to your local National Weather Service office for all the best details. But this video is to give you an overall summary of what's going to happen. Here's the setup this afternoon, this evening, 7 p.m. today. You can see that highlighted yellow area where the severe storms are happening, and you can see a mess of low pressure sensors throughout Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. The low on the Kansas-Oklahoma border is going to become dominant and will rapidly deepen as a bomb cyclone as it moves through the Midwest and into the Great Lakes region. That's driving the severe weather and the major winter storm. And then as we move into the setup tomorrow, you see that area of snow and those fronts up in the Pacific Northwest. That's the atmospheric river. You'll notice that they chain all the way through the mountain western plains, linking up with that low pressure area over the Midwest and Great Lakes, and then a front system continues out of that all the way to Maine. So there's a frontal system in one way or another connecting from Alaska all the way to Maine, and that is bringing out the massive Arctic air outbreak that we're going to see through the weekend and into next week. And once again, you can see tomorrow's severe weather threat highlighted in that yellow color. Now, here are the current warnings. Very active period for National Weather Service offices across the United States at the moment. You can see winter storm watches and warnings in the Pacific Northwest for that atmospheric river, blizzard warnings in Idaho, Blizzard warnings, as I mentioned, throughout much of Iowa, into portions of neighboring states, and a few blizzard warnings up in North Dakota, Minnesota as well. Expansive winter storm warnings with that around there, and of course, winter weather advisories on the periphery of this event. Farther south, wind advisories and high wind warnings from the gradient winds. That's not even from the severe thunderstorm potential, that's just from how intense this system is, how rapidly it's deepening, going to have very strong straight line winds that could cause some minor damage or blow away unsecured and easily loftable objects, such as light garden furniture. Or maybe in the windiest spots, light trampolines, for example. So do tie them down and be safe out there. And of course, there is further flood potential going forwards. You'll also notice that there are some red flag warnings, and because there is a elevated fire risk throughout the southern United States over the next day or so. So just pay attention. Don't do anything that gives a unnecessary risk of starting fires, and just wait for the weather to improve. If you need to burn anything, this will all be over in a day or so. Particularly once it turns colder, be safer for you to burn things if you need to down there. Going into the Winter Storm Severity Index, you can see a fair few areas of red throughout the Midwest and Great Lakes, and that is major impacts, considerable disruption. Avoid travel if at all possible. And to repeat, this is just from the snow. This is not from the extreme cold that will happen after through the weekend. This is just from the snow. And also extreme impacts throughout the Cascades in Oregon from the atmospheric river. Travel through the mountains is going to be very hard unless you go all the way up to Seattle. So I-80, I-90, whichever one it is up by Seattle, should be all right to get through the pass, but any passes in Oregon are going to be dangerous, if not impassable, during this event, and you should plan for that accordingly. And as I mentioned, throughout other parts of the United States, this is quite an expansive event, fairly widespread winter weather impacts possible to at least a moderate level. Now, here's the HRRR model for the next 48 hours across the whole United States. Two things to pay attention to: that rapidly deepening cyclone from the central United States through into the Great Lakes region, all that moisture being pulled up from the Gulf all the way into that snow up by the Great Lakes, very long frontal system pushing all the way down into Florida, sweeping out the entire United States. And that's just the first front. That second cold front, bringing the extremely cold air, is somewhere through the middle United States. You can just about make it out where that low ends up at the end of the run. But you see that blizzard bomb cyclone moving through the Great Lakes. And then over on the west United States, you can see the atmospheric river really picking up during late Friday into Saturday. And that'll be continuing through the weekend in all likelihood. There could be as much as 100 inches of snowfall for a total through this week in some parts of the high mountains in the Pacific Northwest, be that Northern California or the Oregon Cascades. Now, here's a quick reminder of what to do. If you're in a winter weather advisory, you need to be aware that potentially dangerous winter weather is expected within the next 12 to 36 hours or has already started. Travel difficulties are likely, but travel is not impossible. Avoid travel if you can, but if you have to go do something, take the necessary precautions, drive safely. If you're in a winter storm warning, dangerous winter weather will affect you within the next 12 to 36 hours. Considerable travel problems are expected, such as main roads being closed, accidents likely to happen all over the place. Do not travel if you have any other options. But if you have to travel for emergency reasons, please drive safely. If you're in a blizzard warning, very dangerous conditions, whiteout, heavy snow, very difficult to see, and treacherous road conditions. Any major route is likely to be shut down within a blizzard for at least a short period of time. Do not travel unless it is an extreme emergency situation. So prepare accordingly. If you have a few things you need to get before the storm moves in tonight, go get them on the way back from work, or this afternoon if you are not working, of course. And after the storm moves through, if you have a power outage, be careful with heat sources and practice generators safely. Don't let that carbon monoxide come inside. It kills a few people every year, unfortunately, through unsafe generator use. Don't be one of those people, please. Keep it away from doors, windows, garages. Keep them shut. and don't let that get inside. And if you are using heat source such as candles or a space heater, remember that they're a fire risk. Keep pets and children away from them, monitor them, and if you have to go out of the house for some reason, it's not advisable to leave them running when no one's there to keep them safe and make sure they're not catching fire. You don't want to come back an hour later and find that your house has burned down, you have nowhere warm to stay. And obviously, with the severe winter weather impacts, it's unlikely that emergency services will be able to get to you in any reasonable time. Once you're safe and warm, please check on any neighbours that are nearby and keep everyone safe together. Thank you. Now, on into the severe weather outbreak that could unfold across parts of the southern United States over the next day and a half. There are enhanced risks out for both days currently. Today is an all hazards risk, but primarily driven by strong tornadoes and up to hurricane force straight line wind gusts. And you can see that area across the Arklatex into central Arkansas. Tomorrow, this is also tonight, and then it continues into tomorrow, the same event, continuing that enhanced risk across the Mississippi River into northern central Mississippi and northwest Alabama. For now, there's only a large slight risk throughout the rest of tomorrow, pretty much all of that encompassing a 5% tornado risk and a further severe wind risk. There is a 15% severe significant hail risk today, where there could be some large hail, but overall the hail risk should not be as important as the significant wind and potential for strong tornadoes. There is considerable uncertainty regarding the extent of surface-based supercells, i.e. ones that are capable of producing tornadoes, but any that do develop will have the potential to produce strong tornadoes given the very impressive wind shear that's in effect thanks to another extremely strong low-level jet. We had one with the system early this week. We saw some strong tornadoes. We saw a couple of deadly tornadoes, sadly. Hopefully that doesn't repeat itself with this event, but it's always possible, so stay alert. Going in more in detail, you can see the cities that are in the marginal, slight, and enhanced risk, in particular Texarkana, Shreveport, and Hot Springs. Now, this is potentially more dangerous enhanced risk than usual for this area because the Shreveport radar is down for maintenance. So we'll be relying much more on spotter reports and distant radar than you normally would. So if there is a tornado warning issued, even if it's only radar indicated, treat it as if it is a dangerous tornado on the ground because we will have less information than usual. And better safe than sorry, of course. And there's that significant tornado risk that I mentioned, the Hatch 10% area where strong tornadoes are most likely. Around that 5% tornado chance where strong tornadoes are still more than possible, and the 2% tornado chance around that where tornadoes are possible, and they could be strong. It happens from time to time that you get a stronger than you expected tornado in the marginal risk area, just to let you know that you're not in the safe zone. You need to keep an eye on the weather. There's that significant wind risk that I mentioned, starting in central Arkansas and northern Louisiana, and then moving across the Mississippi River during the early morning hours tomorrow. Once again, this is going to be happening after dark tonight, all of this after dark, which further complicates matters. And there's that significant hail risk that I mentioned towards the western side of the risk area. Having a look at the model run, the latest HRRR at time of recording for this system, you can see not much happening until almost midnight, and then things gradually get going, and then as we head into the early morning hours, the pre-dawn hours even, it really gets going. So almost everyone will be asleep apart from the night shift workers and those who have to get up early for an early start, or those that are having struggle sleeping, of course. And so you need a way to wake up if a warning is issued for your location, especially given the issues that we have with the radar maintenance ongoing. On into tomorrow's events, starting immediately during the early morning, with that enhanced risk across northern Mississippi and northwestern Alabama, and then throughout the rest of the day, the system will push east, bringing a tornado and damaging wind threat throughout that slight and marginal risk area. There is a chance that there could be an expansion or upgrade of the enhanced risk, of the slight risk across portions of southern Alabama and South Georgia and the Florida Panhandle near the Gulf Coast, where moisture is higher. And there have been some suggestions that a strong tornado risk could exist here, but we'll have to wait and see what observations show tomorrow, and of course how tonight performs. If tonight underperforms and it looks like things are going to be pretty weak tomorrow, then there's no reason for an upgrade, of course. Just stay tuned and watch out for what the National Weather Service is saying in your local area is the best course of action. And there's that very large 5% tornado risk that I mentioned. And again, there could be an upgrade to some parts of that to a 10% tornado risk, or potentially even a 10% hatched tornado risk area tomorrow. So stay tuned to that. And there is the early morning destructive wind potential, with all of that red area having the potential to produce hurricane force wind gusts during the morning hours tomorrow. Lastly, low chance of severe hail throughout most of the risk area. And here's that model starting from 6 a.m. Central Time, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, and going through to the event moving offshore. You can see that it moves fairly quickly. There's lots of broken showers, but they're not looking particularly strong, which is why we're uncertain about there being any supercells. Of course, there could be what the Gulf is sort of famous for in meteorological communities, the mini supercell. Doesn't tend to show up particularly well on this sort of model data, but the environment is certainly good enough for a couple of those to happen, and if they're surface-based, strong tornadoes are a possibility and could develop at short notice. So pay attention. Most of this should be happening during the day, which is a bonus for areas around here. And as you can see, that's moved completely off the coast before midnight. So you don't have to stay up too late if you're up in the Carolinas wanting to wait for the storms to move through. And lastly, some general tips with overnight severe weather for those along the lower Mississippi Valley region, particularly within that today's risk. Make sure your cell phone's fully charged with your wireless alerts on. If you have a no-weather radio, keep it plugged in. Make sure there's fresh batteries in it in case the power goes out. Of course, you want a flashlight and shoes near your bed so that you are able to move to your safe place. And if your house is damaged by severe straight line winds or a tornado, you're able to move around without debris cutting your feet up. And of course, you need to make sure everyone in your house knows where to go when those warnings are issued for your location. Hopefully, with recent severe weather just earlier this week for the similar area, most people have recently checked these things, but if not, this is your reminder to do that. And that's all for today. We hope you stay safe wherever you are in the United States or indeed around the world. We'll have an update later on the tropical situation, which has finally sparked back to life across the southwest Indian Ocean. Potentially quite a significant threat for Mauritius. We'll have a video out on that soon. Thank you very much for watching and have a good evening. Bye.